We identified in 2014 several different potential sites that were then narrowed down to 4 specific sites. We then focused on the Haynes Creek Reservoir site. This site has 3 drainages that come into it: Haynes Creek, the Arkansas River, and the Huerfano River. And it appeared to be a place where a gravel pit or reservoir could be built quite well and would serve our purposes. We have done some feasibility work on that site over the last several years, and council may remember about 4 or 5 years ago, we brought an agreement which was to reserve an option to purchase this site. And we have been paying every year our share of the option lease price. That option to buy the site expires at the end of this year. So here's a map, and you can see the Rocky Ford office is down. Oh, I don't know if you can see my pointer. I'm sorry. The proposed Haynes Creek storage site is in bright red, so you can see that site. And that's just upstream of Rocky Ford, and it's downstream of Pueblo Reservoir, and it's downstream of the city of Pueblo. So the option expires for this site this year. The feasibility work so far has been very positive and demonstrates that this site would be a good place to build a reservoir. It would enable us to recapture that yield that is lost and exchange that yield back upstream, where we would take it up to Clear Creek Reservoir, which is on higher up in the basin, and you can see the red line, which is the Homestake pipeline, comes out of Twin Lakes above Clear Creek and allows us to recapture that water. Here's just another closer in picture of the site that we are looking at. And then some key points around the site. So, as I said, we have an option to purchase it, which expires at the end of this year. The total cost to acquire the property is $2.8 million, but we would only be paying 28.57% of that, or $814,000. And we have done a preliminary design work and an initial feasibility study. So we think it's a good site. We think it's worth acquiring. The Roy Group, also thinks it's worth acquiring and going forward to do more work to make sure we can build a dam and a storage reservoir on that site. And that is the question that will be before council, but that I'm bringing today just to study to go forward with that acquisition. So when this comes to council, you will have the agreement, which should have been which you should have in front of you now, but the agreement to go forth and acquire the Haynes Creek site for the Roy storage acquisition. So I blew through that very quickly, and am very happy to entertain any questions that you may have.
I have a question, Mayor.
Questions of staff, Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, Alex, thank you for the presentation. So we're paying for our share to purchase the site before it expires, but the capacity we think is 4,350 acre feet.
Yes, and it's not there's a full capacity that we need to recapture all of our lost yield. I think Aurora loses about 5,000 acre feet, and so we would want 5,000 acre feet, but it will get us. It's a step towards that direction.
So what would be the next step?
We will continue to look for more storage opportunities
on that site.
That's a great question. Right now, the initial feasibility study identified a probable storage reservoir of about 4,300 acre feet, as you spotted, and I'm not sure how big, whether the site would enable a larger reservoir at this time. So I don't know the answer to that question as to whether we could build big enough storage on that site, but I don't think we could build enough storage on that site to recapture all 5 cities' foregone yield.
I guess, and that, I think, so that's maybe where I'm a little bit wondering if this is a good return on investment, because we don't know if we're going to get our recapture or what we're losing.
We will recapture a portion of what we're
Most of
losing.
it, yeah.
Yeah, a good portion. And as you know, because you've been here for some time now, Councilwoman Burson, it's this agreement started in 2004, and we've been looking for a good site for a long time. So sites are hard to come by. There is another site that the cities had their eye on, and we still hope that that site will become available at some point. The owners of that particular site is called Stonewall. Really got gold dust in their eyes, and apparently many years ago, the Roy Group, Aurora, Colorado Springs, Pueblo, approached the Stonewall Group and did an appraisal on it. The appraisal was somewhere in the $8 million range, and the owners of the site wanted in the $30 million range.
Oh dear.
And so I don't know if that site will come up, but that is one of the other sites that we have our eyes on if it ever becomes available.
Okay. But so this is a good temporary solution until we get to that next step.
I would say this is a good first step. So this is part of the solution, and then that other one would be like the second step that would allow us to get all of the yield or most of the yield. So this will get us a good, solid part of that lost yield.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Further questions of staff on item number 3D? Further discussion on item number 3D? Seeing none, is there any opposition to moving item number 3D forward? Seeing no opposition, item number 3D will move forward. Item number 3E, resolution to approve the High Plains Trail and Bridge Maintenance IGA 2021. Pat Schuler.
Good evening. Arapahoe County, the town of Parker, and the city of Aurora, along with other funding partners, will build an extension of the High Plains Trail from E470 west to Parker Road and then across Parker Road. This trail segment is primarily in Aurora, runs along the southern boundary of the Kings Point subdivision. Aurora's contribution for the building of this trail was approved by City Council in August of 2021. As a requirement of certain of the funding partners, the maintenance IGA for this trail segment between agreed upon jurisdictions includes Aurora, the town of Parker, and Arapahoe County, and must be in place before the construction funding can be released, which is why we're bringing this IGA to you tonight. The IGA sets out segments of the trail that each of these 3 jurisdictions will have maintenance responsibility for. Just as a refresher, Aurora currently maintains other High Plains Trail segments and will continue to maintain additional trail segments if approved by council as they are built. Aurora will be responsible for the day-to-day and capital maintenance of certain of these trail segments, while Arapahoe County and the town of Parker will be responsible for day-to-day maintenance of another of the trail segments and the pedestrian bridge over Parker Road, as well as the ramp on the west side. All 3 jurisdictions will share equally in the cost of capital maintenance of the bridge itself. Arapahoe County will be responsible for the capital maintenance of the ramp on the west side of Parker. Aurora maintenance responsibilities will begin when the warranty period associated with the trail construction is complete, which will be approximately mid-2023. And funding of these maintenance costs will be requested during the 2023 budget cycle. Does council agree to move this item forward to the regular council meeting? And also, if anybody has any specific questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Questions on staff on item number 3E? I see no questions. Further discussion on item number 3E? I see no further discussion on item number 3E. Item number 3E will move forward. Item number 3F. renewal of an agreement with Wells Fargo for various banking services. Teresa Sedmak.
Yes, good evening. I'm Teresa Sedmak, and I am here to ask your consideration of the renewal of the city's contract with Wells Fargo for treasury management services. The city entered into a contract with Wells Fargo in July of 2006. It's been extended a number of times and currently comes due at the end of the year. Treasury management services the city receives from Wells Fargo include ACH, or the electronic delivery of funds, branch services, cash vault, lockbox, wires, account reporting, and reconciliation. So in determining a recommended action related to the contract, we undertook an analysis of services and fees, earnings credit rate, and the credit strength of Wells Fargo versus its competitors. We solicited pricing indications from 3 other financial institutions, which included JP Morgan Chase, KeyBank, and US Bank are the major competitors here that provide services to governmental entities. In evaluating the responses from those banks, it was determined that Wells Fargo had a price advantage to those banks. And I should note that JP Morgan Chase decided against doing a line item comparison, pricing comparison, but they did provide us a letter which confirmed that the current pricing that was offered was competitive and generally in line with market conditions and consistent with the prior pricing on the contract. And that while they could provide better pricing on some services, Wells Fargo offers lower pricing for others. So that was the pricing comparison. Another comparison we asked for was the earnings credit rate. An earnings credit rate is a rate typically offered by banks, and it is specifically designed to offset charges and fees. So it's a bank managed rate based upon market conditions and subject to periodic adjustments. Wells Fargo offered an earnings credit rate significantly above those offered by its competitors. It's a premium variable rate with downside protection through the end of the year and a bottom of 35 basis points through 2023. So the earnings credit rate was significantly above those of its competitors. We also looked at financial strength. Those are summarized in your board packet. And while all of the competing banks are capable and qualified to provide banking services to the city, and all are eligible public depositories in the state of Colorado, their credit ratings differ. The ratings of Wells Fargo and JP Morgan Chase were slightly stronger than either US Bank or KeyBank. So as a result of our analysis and the fact that we are very happy and satisfied with the services we get from Wells Fargo, it is recommended that the city's contract with Wells Fargo be extended from the end of this year for an additional 5-year period, and they have offered a 6-month extension option at that expiration upon mutual agreement. So I'm happy to answer any questions or concerns you may have in this regard, and I thank you for your consideration.
Questions of staff on item number 3F? Discussion on item number 3F? Seeing no discussion, item number 3F will move forward. Item number 3G, proposed changes to AMC 134 Tag 38. Lieutenant Colleen Delana.
Thank you, sir. Good evening. I can get my thing to work here for you guys. We are asking to update the language for Aurora Municipal Code 134-38. I can go over the lines we'd like to change. We're asking to replace the following. You are encouraged to also contact the watch commander of the Aurora Police Department for the purpose of resolving a dispute governing the impoundment of your vehicle without the necessity of having a formal hearing. We'd like to strike that language and instead have, you may contact the watch commander of the Aurora Police Department for purposes of resolving a dispute concerning the impoundment of your vehicle. The Aurora Police Department will consider fee waivers and reimbursements only in exceptional circumstances or by order of the court. After an initial request for refund or waiver from the watch commander is denied and the Aurora Municipal Courts determine the impoundment was lawful, the Aurora Police Department will not consider any subsequent requests for waivers or fees. We're basically asking this to just change and make it a little more transparent of what they can expect when they're asking for fee waivers. We still want to offer the citizens an option to speak with the department representative, but we'd like to lay out that only when exceptional circumstances, i.e. illegal tows, are met, will the APD reimburse fees. The second portion we'd ask to change is the written notice shall be deposited in the U.S. mail within 24 hours from the time of impoundment. We'd like to change that to the written notice shall be deposited in the U.S. mail by close of the following business day from the date of the impoundment. Updating this mailing requirement to make it more reasonable, changing that 24 hours to the end of the next business day. We've run into some problems in the past where people have argued when things were sent out, having no ability to know when things get postmarked or mailed by the city and by the USPS. This gives us a little bit more room and maybe stop some of the arguments we have that it wasn't sent out, but still giving a reasonable amount of time that people can get the information about their vehicle or their vehicles. Are there any questions?
Questions of staff?
I have a question.
Mayor Pro Tem.
So the impoundment lot is the one down 6th Avenue? Is that what
It's on Colfax, ma'am.
on Colfax?
Yeah, 19,000.
Yeah, and so they control all the fees there. And when someone's car is impounded, who notifies them? Is it the police or the impoundment lot?
They get two different notifications, ma'am. So if it's impounded by us, they will get what I read at the beginning actually goes out on a postcard to the people. And then they also get a certified letter from the M&M lot. Since we do not own the tow yard, that third-party company is required to also send a notification.
Do you know if that's when that certification is sent out? I mean, are they required to do it within 24 hours or?
I do not know. Theirs is a certified mail is what they send out. I do not know what time frame they're required by law to send it out. I only know what we are.
Okay. I just know that there's been a couple instances where people didn't even know their car was stolen and then it got impounded. And so
yeah, that happens all the time.
Yeah. And I've always advocated that we should have our own impound lot, but that's a different matter.
Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Further questions of staff on item number 3G?
Mayor.
Councilmember Marcano.
Thank you, sir. Well, looking through the backup for this, I noticed that this was flagged as not being, or as being moved forward without recommendation. Can we talk a little bit about that and how the discussion went at public safety? As this, I couldn't find minutes for this. It was too recent.
We went through, I don't know if Megan wants to answer that.
Good evening, members of council. This item was presented for consideration at the public safety meeting a couple of weeks ago. Lieutenant Delena essentially went through the changes. No one had any questions or further discussion, and the item was moved forward for consideration here at study session tonight.
Okay, so it was marked incorrectly then. Thank you.
Further questions of staff? Further discussion on item number 3G? Seeing none, item number 3G will move forward. Item number 3H, Highline Canal Collaborative Memorandum of Understanding. Tracy Young.
Good evening, council. My name is Tracy Young. I'm the manager of planning, design, and construction for the pros department. So this resolution is to approve a memorandum of understanding between 13 stakeholders of the Highline Canal Collaborative. The Canal Collaborative's purpose is to jointly work toward the implementation of community plans to repurpose the canal from a water delivery system to a 71-mile recreational greenway. The Highline Canal Conservancy will serve as the lead organizational entity for the Canal Collaborative. They'll provide facilitation, communications, and coordination between the 13 stakeholders. I'm happy to answer any questions tonight, if you have any, and ask if you would like to move this item forward to regular.
Questions to staff? Seeing none, is there further discussion on item number 3H? Seeing no further discussion, item number 3H will move forward. Item number 4A, ARPA Community Engagement Update. Charis Canales.
Hey, my name is Mike Franks. I'm from the budget office. I'm actually going to kick this off. Can I have authorization to share? All right, good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Our purpose tonight is to give you an update on the American Rescue Plan, some reminders about exactly what the purposes of it are and the history, as well as an overview of the public engagement process. And also the main point is to get some feedback from council on the high-level projects and priorities that you'd like to have. We don't have enough funding to cover all the different priorities that have been mentioned by the public and the staff has recommended as projects. So we're looking to you to get some guidance on what kinds of items you'd like to see funded. So we'll start with some brief history. It was signed into law by President Biden on March 11, 2021. It was about a $1.9 trillion package of a variety of funding, some direct aid, some grants for a variety of different purposes. The city of Aurora will receive $65.4 million in one-time funding. Additional funding provided for programs related to rent assistance. And the funding will be divided into two payments. The first payment the city already received, and the second one we will receive in May 2020. And one of the important pieces to note is the funds will be available until December 31, 2024. It can be dedicated until, it can be expended until December 31, 2026. So we have until 2024 to dedicate the funding, to name a project, to allocate the funding for a specific item, but we can spend the funding up until 2026. So how can we spend the funds? So the first one is to address the public health emergency and negative economic impacts and a variety of different things. So you can think of this one as the variety of social economic impacts that have occurred because of COVID. What could we do to make those items better? So what was made worse by COVID from a social economic perspective, and what could we do to potentially make those items better? Provide essential workers premium pay for eligible workers. For the provision of government services to the extent that we lost revenue. So essentially, the federal government has a formula that decided how much revenue we lost associated with or due to COVID-19. So the amount that we lost due to COVID-19 can be spent for governmental services, so it significantly broadens the requirements. The city does believe that we have lost a significant amount of revenue based on the formula due to COVID-19. We have not yet finalized that, but that does give us probably a significant amount of flexibility. That being said, we have still tried to align the projects with the federal government's priorities and with the community's priorities in terms of what they'd like to see funded. The last item would be the necessary investments for water, sewer, or broadband infrastructure. How we can't spend the funding. So either directly or indirectly offset a reduction in tax rates. Basically, if we lost revenue based on a tax change, we cannot use the revenue to cover that. And no fund shall be deposited into any pension funds. And I would also add that you cannot use it to make debt service payments. So factors to consider for council. So we've talked about these before, but one of the key factors that staff would recommend is to select one-time projects or short-term initiatives. The reality is that this is going to be one-time infusion for the city. So we'll get the $65.4 million, but any ongoing costs will be likely be the city's responsibility. We do not anticipate additional federal funding will come in and cover those costs. So while we have at this point a fairly stable budget moving forward, as you saw in the budget presentation, we already have small shortfalls in the future, and any additional funding we would add would just add to those shortfalls. We also have a variety of opportunities to develop regional partnerships and state partnerships. So this is one of the key things I want to talk about is the reality that we have an opportunity to leverage federal, state, and regional dollars As I mentioned, we have $65.4 million in funding. We have over $200 million in projects that have been submitted by staff. So we are going to have to leverage a significant amount of funding if we're going to come even close to meeting some of those requirements. We have a variety of different opportunities that are available that could provide regional opportunities and regional solutions. That being said, we also need to be patient. Some of those solutions are still in the works and have not yet been finalized. So that's why we're coming to you tonight with some more broad context. We can get some ideas of what you'd want to see funded so that we can go and kind of work through those regional partnerships. In addition, there's federal legislation that has the potential to impact the project selection process. I think everybody's probably aware that there's an infrastructure bill at the federal level that may or may not pass, and a variety of other funding measures. Those measures obviously have the ability to have a significant impact on the projects that would be funded by ARPA. We're not going to fund a project that the federal government will give us direct funding for, or potentially a good grant opportunity. So that would obviously have an impact, and again, points towards the reality that we need to be patient and be adaptable as we go through this process. This is just breaking it down by the spending categories. You'll remember these from CARES. So for community assistance, $135 million, infrastructure, $137 million, and for service preservation, $17 million. So a significant amount of funding has been requested for these various projects. Again, this just gives you context of what's been requested. At this point, I'll turn it over to Carice, who will give an update on the public engagement component, and then we'll circle back to talk about the priorities for council.
Thank you, Michael. We can go to the next slide. So good evening, Mayor and members of council. My name is Carice Canales, and I'm the Community Engagement Manager at the city. You may recall I came to present to you in August to give an outline of our community engagement plan for getting the community's feedback into this ARPA funding decision. And so, really we went out to the community to ask them what are their biggest needs and what are their big dreams and ways that we can make sure that we thrive as a community as we head into recovery from COVID. So over the last 6 weeks, we have been out in the community gathering this feedback. We created a project on Engage Aurora, the city's online community engagement platform. And on that project, it includes both a survey and idea boards. And those idea boards allow us to get more open-ended feedback from our community to really get their ideas and their buy-in as we're trying to decide how to allocate these dollars. So in addition to the survey, well, we did translate it into the top 10 languages in Aurora. We also distributed it throughout our libraries. We had coasters in restaurants. We held 4 community listening sessions and presented at different public meetings and at community events. So through that whole engagement over the last 6 weeks, we ended up hearing, as of this morning, 768 surveys. And I do want to note that the survey will be open until this Friday. So this is an update in our process, but we can still give you some pretty good themes and highlights. In addition to the surveys, we had 100 people respond on our idea boards, giving over 300 or almost 300 ideas. And as you can see in this graph, this shows respondents by ward. So it's a pretty even distribution across the city, which we're very happy to see. So with all of our different engagement strategies, we were able to get a good cross-sector of our community. And we did hear from really diverse perspectives from all backgrounds. So what we'll dive into in the next few slides is just a snapshot on what we heard. And then, it's part of our ongoing conversation with you all. We can dive in deeper as we wrap up all of the engagement, but certainly want to share some highlights with you. So next slide, Michael. So the first piece I'll highlight is in the survey itself, we went out with those 3 spending categories that Michael mentioned. So community assistance, infrastructure, and service preservation. And we went out to the community and asked them to rank different items within each bucket. And so under community assistance, we asked people to rank from 1 to 5, with 1 being the highest priority and 5 being the lowest priority. So we had them rank affordable housing, mental health support, family assistance, which I know can be a bit general. So generally speaking, that's immediate family assistance like income and food security. And then as well as homelessness services and small business relief. And so on the rankings, you know, there's not one topic that really rose to the top by a large means. And so what that told us is that the needs of our community are diverse. And what we heard in some of the open-ended questions on this was that our community sees all 5 of these areas as extreme priorities, so it was hard for them to rank it. So we did hear, you know, that this was one of the most important areas. Out of the rankings, the ones that did rise to the top the most were affordable housing, mental health support, and family assistance. Next slide, please. So the next bucket was under infrastructure funding. So we had people rank road and street maintenance, water system enhancements, broadband, accessibility to city facilities, and multimodal improvements. And you can see here there is a bit more of a difference in the priorities, where road and street maintenance and water system enhancements were the top 2. But certainly, again, our community is very diverse in its needs, and we're seeing that come out in the rankings. And I'll dive in a little bit more on the open-ended surveys, but you know, a lot of these themes keep popping up. And you can go ahead, next slide. So finally, under the service preservation bucket, we had the options for supporting public safety and essential workers, assistance to nonprofits, restoration of lost city revenue, debt service, and ARPA administrative requirements. And again, you can see a bit more of a difference with the rankings, where there's a much stronger prioritization for support of public safety, assistance to nonprofits, and the restoration of city revenue, really getting the funding back into the community. And you can go to the next slide. So finally on the survey, we did ask people to prioritize the 3 funding buckets themselves, and community assistance did come in first. And so one of the things that we had heard, again, was from our community, they saw community assistance as getting more direct and immediate impact for recovering from COVID. So that is a little bit on the rankings, and then we can go into some more of the open-ended feedback that we heard. And this was from both the idea boards and our community listening sessions. Really, this was an opportunity for our community to dream bigger and share their ideas that may have fallen outside of some of the focus areas that were already identified. But the top themes that really rose up were affordable housing and homelessness supports, mental health and rehabilitation services and facilities, as well as waste or recycling and compost solutions. So that could have been including, you know, a single hauler system, having bulky item disposal, even having trash bins in our parks and trails, things like that. But when we did go through the feedback, we heard so many rich ideas of how our community feels that we could make the most impact with these ARPA dollars. And as Michael Frank said, you know, we're going to need to leverage the dollars to make all of these a reality. But we certainly want to share with you a snapshot of some of the things that were bubbling up as priorities. So next slide. And finally, I just wanted to share with you, at the last presentation I did in August to you all, Councilmember Murillo had asked about identifying barriers for people accessing COVID relief in the past. So we did incorporate that into our survey so that we could keep it in mind as we get further in these funding discussions about how to actually get the funding into the community and make sure that it's as easy as of a process as possible. And so some of the themes that we've heard were, that it is a long and complicated process in the past to receive the funds. People have challenges with documentation. They may not qualify based off of either their income, citizenship status, or if they've already received COVID relief funding in the past. But certainly a few other things to highlight that kept coming up was a lack of information or awareness that these resources even existed. And also people being afraid or being intimidated to apply for the funding. So I think these are all really tangible things for us to keep in mind as we think about how to get this relief funding into our community. And with that, I'll pass it back to Michael.
And I think it makes sense before we get to next steps and asking council for their priorities. If you council has any questions about the ARPA process generally, the history of it, or the community engagement process, we go ahead and ask those now, because then we're going to ask for your feedback. So I don't want to have those questions get lost.
Questions of staff? Seeing none, then Councilmember Marcano.
Sorry, thank you. I just want to know if y'all are able to track the most effective methods of outreach for this, because obviously this is, I think, better than a lot of the previous things I've seen where we get 300 or maybe 400 folks. We're creeping up on 800 here, but what's working for us and what's not, and how can we help?
Absolutely. So on Engage Aurora, I can pull all those reports if any of you ever want to see that. The one that rose to the top was Facebook. That was really, really driving people to the platform. And then off of online, our libraries made a huge impact in the paper surveys, meeting people where they're already going, especially some of our community members who are underrepresented. I definitely got a lot of that from the paper surveys at the libraries.
Thank you.
Further questions of staff?
Mayor Gardner.
Councilmember Gardner.
Since this wasn't included in our backup, could this presentation be sent out to council?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Happy to do that. We were gathering data until today, so wanted to get you the most recent numbers. So let's follow up.
What did you say the amount was that we're to the ARPA amount?
The 65.4 million, or the survey total, or the funding?
ARPA, no, the ARPA amount in terms of dollars, federal dollars.
65.4 million with opportunities to leverage it, but that's the amount of direct aid we'll receive.
Okay. I'm sorry, what do you mean by leveraging again? Is that working with the state or working with the county?
State, regional partners, and there's also federal opportunities to apply for grants.
Okay, so let me mention some areas that the governor's staff has reached out to me and to our staff here, but I don't think that council's in the loop yet. And that is, I think the governor has expressed an interest in 3 areas. One is on the issue of homelessness. What the governor would like to do for what the category of transitional housing is work with Denver, Aurora, and Arapahoe County and the state in terms of leveraging our ARPA dollars and putting some into the, I think it's called the Ridgeview facility, which is just a little bit outside of Aurora on Quincy Road. That is a state facility, a state-owned facility that was run under contract and for juvenile program. And the state council that project, and the governor would like to see that into a facility for homelessness. Wouldn't be emergency housing, but it would be for those in programs that would be transitional housing for families and individuals. The second issue that the governor asked, is there anything infrastructure-wise in terms of one-time spending that would be related to mental health? I did inform the governor about the idea that Aurora Mental Health has in terms of consolidating its services into a campus in the vicinity of, I believe it's 225 in Mississippi, south of Mississippi, on the west side of 225. And the governor asked anything about affordable housing. And one thing I mentioned to the governor was that there were some, and staff would need to comment on this further, some shovel-ready projects for multifamily affordable housing along the Colfax corridor between Peoria and the Denver line. The governor liked that concept in terms of working with us because it's along a transit corridor, albeit a bus route. And that it's affordable, obviously, was one of his criteria, and I think would have some other positive impacts in the area. With that, let me open up to further discussion.
Mayor Davis.
Councilmember Gruber.
Mayor, first off, those three, I think they're spot on. I think addressing the homelessness, addressing the TOD site, and especially addressing the Aurora Mental Health and their campus, I think those are spot on. I'd like to ask a question about process, though, because we've got the $64 million. We've got opioid money coming in, and we've got the input from 700, almost 750 residents. What process do you see council following in order to make decisions? And also, the other important fact is that the money doesn't have to be spent this year. We have time to do more in-depth analysis and to spend it over a larger period of time. But it would seem to me that a couple of key decisions would be, first off, how much are we going to spend this year? Second off, what process are we going to use? How do we vet each council member's priorities so that those are put into some sort of grid that can then be discussed by council before we make the vote? Has that been defined yet?
Yeah, that's actually a great segue into the last part and kind of the more guided component of selecting projects. So for project prioritization, the way staff has thought about it in terms of prioritizing projects, this is more of a timeline, less about prioritization, but we have the top bucket, the top tier one being immediate assistance to residents and businesses impacted by COVID-19. So those are things like direct aid to businesses, food assistance that we could go ahead and do right now that have a direct impact. Then tier two, service and operational enhancements to increase productivity. So things that we could do long-term that would allow us to be more productive as staff. Partnerships to address regional challenges. Obviously, that's going to take a little bit more time than the first two, so it's further down tier. And then transformational projects designed to have a lasting impact. So that's kind of the time continuum the staff is thinking about. And the process that staff has decided on at this point with council's input, obviously, is to engage council tonight to get a feel of what council's priorities are so that can be considered. And then to allow staff to potentially address projects that have been submitted if necessary, but then to compose a team of cross-departmental staff as well as some residents in the city to review the projects and prioritize them based on 4 criteria. So the first 2 are equitable and evidence-based. So those are 2 things that the federal government has really emphasized in terms of our ARPA reporting. So we really want to be focused on those 2 items based on that being a federal government guideline. 25% being citizen input, so using the results of tonight and the rest of the surveys, then using cost benefit. So that information would then serve as the framework for which would be taken down back to senior management to provide a formal recommendation. But I do see this potentially being a process that we provide a recommendation here in the near future so that we can start to fund some of those items that have critical timelines. There are going to be some projects where we need to have matching dollars here soon, but also that we can continue to monitor the situation at the federal level, monitor regional partnerships, and have it be an ongoing process. So I would imagine there being kind of a continuation of this process as time goes on based on the feedback tonight, and then the feedback we get from the committee as well as then senior management. So that's the general process, and we were hoping, as I said tonight, to get some feedback from council on your high-level priorities so we can obviously factor that into the decision-making process.
Mayor?
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, and I guess we're going to talk about infrastructure next, but I think in terms of the number of surveys, you said 768 surveys out of our population of 386,000, 390,000. I mean, that's still a very, very, very small percentage of the population. So when you say that, and I think it was a criteria of the funds that we need 25% public input, what 25% of our population, or?
It would just be 25% of the ranking. So we'd rank the projects based on those criteria. But that's based off
such a small amount of people. I mean, I don't want to base my decisions on and I don't even remember how many were in Ward 6. It looked like it was pretty spread out, but still, even if you divide that by 6, that's such a small percentage of the population. I personally don't even feel comfortable using that as a guiding, guidance. I would prefer to use my own knowledge with some of the survey, but I don't want to put a ton of credibility on the survey because I think it's such a small percentage.
So with a lot of these public engagement processes, we do look at a sample size of the population, and then we elevate that group. What are the key themes and priorities that we keep hearing over and over? And so then we can, kind of broaden it to the rest of our community. And that's why we are really intentional with making sure we are outreaching to all the different wards in the city, that we were going to where our community was already gathering, and making sure that we had it in all the different languages possible, trying to be really intentional in that way.
Yeah.
And then just one follow-up.
Mayor Pro Tem, please proceed.
Community assistance. And I heard, regional solutions, because to me, community assistance, a lot of the subcategories are county responsibilities. We don't do SNAP. We don't do, family assistance from that perspective. We don't do mental health. That's through various nonprofits. And then also through the counties. So are we going to take that into account when we allocate monies that under community engagement or community assistance, that really needs to be more of a regional partnership? And then like under infrastructure, that's our responsibility. That is what our citizens expect us to take care of in terms of infrastructure and roads and so forth. So is that how we're looking at that first category, is more regional?
So I would say there's ways that we can leverage those dollars, as we've been mentioning. One of the categories it was under service preservation was assistance to nonprofits. So, some of what we can use the ARPA dollars are to support nonprofits doing those different family assistance programs. So you get a little bit of crossover between some of the buckets.
Right, but my question is more, are we overlapping with the counties? Like the counties also have ARPA money. So are they going to be doing these services? And then we're going to throw more money on top of it when we might be better served to put money in things that the county is not going to touch. Like they're not touching infrastructure that affects our city and our residents.
Yeah, I think the thought would be that in situations where we can leverage the county's dollars to find an ultimate solution to an issue that council and the community believes is a challenge, then we would take advantage of those opportunities. But it would not necessarily be to take over the responsibilities of the counties, but to potentially use those as leveraging opportunities. And if council will, there are a couple questions and we can kind of go through this exercise because we actually break it down and kind of go through the slides again so the council can provide input in terms of the specific items. So I feel like we're headed towards that conversation anyways, but so we don't want to make people repeat themselves as we go through it again.
Please proceed.
Mayor.
Councilmember Brosens.
Thank you. You had mentioned that there's still more money floating around out there. Does Aurora have any money that hasn't been expended, or are we expecting more other than these ARPA funds?
We would not be expecting any more. There was some other funding related to the ARPA bill, but most of that at this point is related to grants and then leveraging the regional opportunities. So taking advantage of the fact that the counties and the state have a significant amount of funding, but we have also, if council remember, to the fall workshop, we did include 2 positions in the finance department, one more grant compliance, one more grant development, to try to get at the opportunity of leveraging those dollars, applying for grants that are available, both as this part of ARPA, but also as part of the infrastructure bill, if that does happen, because it appears that it would be the same in terms of there being opportunities, but you know, we have to apply for those opportunities. So at this point, that's primarily what we're looking at.
Okay. But let me say, before we proceed, and then I think we'll go through this. I'm sorry, Councilmember Burgess, did you have anything else?
Yeah, well, I just wanted to know exactly how does a group apply for this? I mean, who do they go talk to? Who in the city do they make an appointment with to talk with?
You would mean like a resident, or at this point we have not opened up
company, you know, a company like Aurora Mental Health, you know, they have a campus they're trying to get built.
Right.
So who do they go talk to?
If I could, Mayor, and that is so the governor's office has reached out to the city, and the governor gave some kind of areas that he wanted to focus on to see if we could work together on. And one of it, and all of them were related to infrastructure. So one was infrastructure to support mental health, and that's where that fit what Aurora Mental Health wants to do with the campus. One that the governor was specific on that he wanted us to work with us on, and that was the Ridgeview Academy facility. And then the governor asked about do we have projects that in terms of affordable housing. So the governor has 3 categories that he'd like to work with. We can negotiate with him what those projects could be, but I do think that there's an advantage in working with the governor's office and the leadership of the governor in terms of being able to leverage dollars, not just state ARPA dollars, but also that the governor's office can bring us together with, say, Arapahoe County, with Denver, you know, and with the state in terms of looking at the Ridgeview. That's what he mentioned, looking at the Ridgeview facilities. So whatever the projects are, I do think there's an advantage of working to leverage the dollars that we have.
Mayor?
Councilmember Coombs.
So as far as working with the state, my understanding is that there are going to be a lot of opportunities to work with funds that were put forward by the state legislature, and that they're currently in sessions right now determining how those funds are going to get set out with respect to grants and other types of programming. So I would be cautious to say that our partnerships need to specifically go through the governor's office. I also think that as a city council, we want to make sure that we're not just giving over what we're trying to do to the governor's office, and we have specific local needs. And finally, I think for tonight, I guess my question or my concern would be setting aside specific amounts for specific projects when there's all these opportunities that are still under development that are for partnerships with state, federal, and county partners. So I would be concerned if we were to say X amount is going to this project and X amount going to that project when we have the amount of time that we have and we need flexibility on those projects. And just as a side note, with respect to the Ridgeview campus, it's extremely far from the city of Aurora proper and from the main parts of our city where we're having folks experiencing housing instability, and is not connected to public transit. So I would be highly concerned about dedicating any significant amount of money to that project.
Further discussion.
Mayor, this is Jessica Prosser, Director of Housing and Community Services. May I add something to this?
Please.
So you all are all right. Yes, there will be several opportunities to leverage funding. I just did want to mention that the state has set aside about $500 million for both mental health. It's under a behavioral health category, actually. And then also another about 500 million for housing and homelessness through a housing task force. And so the state is creating recommendations for how those funds are to be spent and leveraged. There are some opportunities that are coming out sooner. In the next couple of weeks, the state will be soliciting for projects. So there is an opportunity to sort of have some quick wins, some projects that are shovel ready to get going on. And then the rest of those recommendations from those two different task forces will be available around January. And the state anticipates putting out a notice of funding probably in around the February timeframe. I think to the mayor's point with what the governor is really looking for is for cities to bring projects forward to the state through that process, which are leveraging both locality money, this county monies, and then the state money. So they're looking for those kind of regional partnership pieces. So staff has been talking with both Adams and Arapahoe County. We've had a few conversations with Denver. We've even had conversations with other local communities about leveraging on many of these projects, because we know that our ARPA dollars will not go as far if we're not leveraging those. So I just wanted to add that to the conversation, that the state is going through a process, and it also feels like they're ready to have some sort of quick wins. If there are some key identified projects, we can bring to them sooner than the January, February timeframe.
Mr. Mayor, I'd also just add that staff does generally agree as well that the goal of tonight's session was not to allocate specific dollar amounts for specific projects. It was at this point to go through the focus areas, so the areas that Carice noted, and have council kind of point out where their priorities were, where they saw opportunities within those areas, and that's what the staff was missing anything. So it was, again, more of a brainstorming session. But as Jessica mentioned, we do also have to be ready to act. So we want to tee everything up so that staff can be ready to act based on council's input.
Is there more of your presentation right now?
It's just a guiding session. So given community feedback and staff identified focus areas, which topics within each category does council want to prioritize? So first with community assistance, and this can just kind of guide the conversation, or we can take it where it goes, but of the items that Carice mentioned in that category, the affordable housing, the mental health support, the family assistance, the homelessness services, and small business relief, or other items that staff may have missed, are there items here that staff or council believes staff should prioritize?
Well, I think that I would hope that affordable housing would be a priority in terms of trying to move some projects forward.
I have, Mayor.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, just something, it's not on the list, but you know, we have a lot of people that do have homes that are in disrepair that, you know, need help with. Sometimes it's their landscaping, sometimes it's their home in general. Is there anything in this just to help with that aspect? I know we do like that beautification grant every year, which is minimal. So just wondering if there's any help for those type of people that, you know, are working or retired and they can't afford to fix their homes.
It was not, I believe, included in this list, and Carice can correct me if I was wrong if it came up, but that is certainly something that staff could include as a project that would certainly fit within the realm of what we're discussing.
Okay, thanks.
Further discussion.
Mayor Dave Gruber.
Councilmember Gruber.
Again, I'm still a little bit concerned about the process. I understand the presentation, and I appreciate that. We had a discussion about the counties. When we had the COVID money come in, the counties were pretty good about coming to us to say, we have this much money, we're going to grant this money to you specifically for business support. And we want it to be spent in this way, and we want you to account for it in this way. So it's going to be very important to understand how much money the county is going to be applying, Arapahoe, Adams, and Douglas counties are going to be applying to Aurora, and their guidelines on using that money, because then what we should probably do is back out some of our money that we intended to duplicate what the county was going to do so that we can move that somewhere else. I'm also a little bit concerned about the timeline. I understand that, as I said earlier, the entire process can take years. However, you know, those quick kills, or the quick, I don't like the word quick kill on this term, but quick hits where we can make some progress. You know, I think council does need to decide that we will take X% of the money right away And, whether that's $5 million, $10 million, whatever that number is right away, and we'll apply it to the highest priorities, like we said earlier, whether it's shovel ready or other initiatives where we can have an impact immediately. But I think that decision that we're going to do that needs to be made first, and then the process for deciding how that money is going to be spent would be made second. So what I'm advocating for is that process. First off, identifying how much needs to be spent right away and what process we're going to use to make sure that money is spent as best we can spend it.
And I agree with that. I think if council would like to allocate a specific amount for specific projects, I think staff would be more than open to that. And I was not actually with the city or in the state for the last the CARES Act, but based on my recollection, I think the slight difference was that money had to be spent really quickly. So counties and localities are spending a little bit more time kind of figuring out what they're going to do. That being said, I appreciate your comments, and we don't want to miss any opportunities. So we will definitely be back before we miss any opportunities to provide that formal recommendation.
Thank you.
Further discussion?
Yep, Mayor.
Councilmember Mercado.
Thank you, sir. I agree with you. Affordable housing is number one here, but I also would like to have us prioritize homeless services very highly, especially given the situation in the city and the country, and the potential for more folks to unfortunately be displaced in the coming weeks and months. So that'd be my 2 cents on this slide.
Councilmember Murillo.
Thank you, Mayor. I was actually going to ask about the distinction between affordable housing and homelessness, only because, our homeless strategic plan, it kind of combines them. So it's like our housing strategy on a spectrum. So I guess I was just curious why that was broken out, because to me, affordability and housing does, kind of relate to homelessness services, but I guess I don't know if that's a question or more of a comment, really. But I think we should prioritize both. All of these. It's hard to rank these because all of these feel so important. But I do like to see that there's more input than less. I recall when we were voting on the upzone of Ward 1, the majority of City Council was okay with community input engagement process. There was 3 meetings, about 30 people each meeting, and several duplicate members at each meeting. So when we think about seeing a certain threshold for what people are comfortable with, I can't help but recall that vote. So I'm hoping that, moving forward, I am surprised to see so many folks who have taken the survey. I hope we can continue to get more. That would be my ask of anyone who's watching tonight, since this is open until the 8th, to give feedback. I know it's going to be really challenging for us to decide how we're going to spend this, but I think the more the merrier on folks taking the survey.
Further discussion?
Mayor?
Councilmember Coombs.
So I do think that Councilman Gruber's idea of deciding what percentage of the funds we are going to dedicate toward the immediate assistance category makes some sense. I think the other 3 areas, it seems like that's the area where those are the areas where we have a little more time to look at exactly how the partnerships are going to play out with other entities. But I understand that there are some specific immediate things that we need to deal with. I just want us to be careful about putting too much of our money into the immediate and not looking at that long-term planning and partnership. But I would like to move forward with talking about how much money do we want to put into that immediate assistance category.
Further discussion?
Mayor, I guess that was a proposal. So I'll propose that 20%, this is just off the cuff, and if staff have other ideas, go to immediate assistance. So do staff have an idea of how much might be needed for some of those immediate assistance categories, or have any suggestions there?
Staff?
I think a personal thought would be that it makes more sense for perhaps staff to come back with a formal recommendation. If will, because we haven't fully looked at there's a lot of projects that I think are going to be high priority that are going to cost just a significant amount of money.
Right.
So for staff to go back and take a look at what the allocation should look like and come back with a formal recommendation.
Yeah, I certainly, I don't want to, I understand the need to get some money out the door, but I also am concerned that we might be missing out on we might be missing out on leveraging opportunities. So is there any objection to staff coming back with a proposal? Seeing none, then staff will come back with a proposal on what should be immediate in terms of funding.
Mayor?
Mayor Pro Tem.
When they do that, can they give us, kind of details in a table format, chart format, something that shows how they, what they're looking for? It's an amount, but what they're thinking.
Sure, I think that's a great idea. That what are the examples of immediate spending and what and then we can prioritize it. So I would think that would make sense. Sure. Councilmember Lawson.
And also, I think within the equation too, for me, I know we have some of the ready shovel projects or some things like that, but also for these longer term projects, I would like to look at the sustainability of these items, because you're going to have this one-time funding, and then all of a sudden, if we have to take it away or we can't support it, that's a real problem that the city's going to have to address. So I would like for something like that to be on the spreadsheet. Maybe some of these projects we're thinking about long-term that we will probably have to sustain ourselves, either through partnerships. I would like to maybe have a little bit of some commentary on some of those and some of how we would support that. Will we have the ability? I know we can't truly predict the future, but sustainability is really important. So
it's very important, because I just want to echo that. I think it's very important because I think that the intent here is that this is one-time money, and if you're going to do things that create an annual operating expenditure, then I think that's going to have an impact on the budget on the general fund. That could be pretty tough in future years. Further discussion.
Mayor.
Councilmember McConnell.
Thank you, sir. Question for staff. Do you have an idea as to, the other jurisdictions that I'd be able to partner with here or leverage some of this funding, what their timelines look like for, finishing their rulemaking or their programming, just so that, we know when it might make sense to move forward without potentially missing out on any of those opportunities?
I do not know specifics. The last engagement I had with other localities, they were still working with their councils, but other staff may have more specific updates, but I'm not aware of details at this point.
Further discussion.
Yeah, Mayor.
Councilmember McConnell.
Yeah, I guess a quick follow-up. I mean, are you aware, at least, Mike, if some of these other jurisdictions are taking a similar stance and just waiting to see what everyone else does? I'm just concerned that, some of us might be waiting a little too long. Others might not wait long enough. And, we need to be in very constant communication here, I feel, so that we don't, accidentally miss these opportunities.
Yeah, I think my sense has been that staff in other localities are trying to play the same game that we are, whereas Ms. Prosser mentioned there's a variety of opportunities that might come from the state here soon that we need to be ready for in the next coming months. But then there's also a lot of long-term regional partnerships that just take a fair amount of time to develop when there's a lot going on and there's long-term operational cost, and it's just not always that easy. And then it's, staff then working with their council and then coming back. So it does take some time there. So I think everybody's trying to play and manage that balancing act like we are. But I think staff could reach out to some other localities and find some more details or to provide, some additional guidance for council.
I have a couple items to add to that. So I went through the state's process, obviously, and I'm speaking only on the areas that I know more about. Denver has laid out their plan around housing and homelessness. I think it's a $260 million plan around hotel motel acquisition and rehab for permanent supportive housing. They're putting a significant amount of investment into additional gap financing for affordable housing and things like that. Adams County has taken some preliminary proposals. We've had some regional meetings with them. They're also looking at the hotel motel piece. They're looking at creating a D-resource center kind of in the North Glen area. They're interested in partnering with us on an overnight homelessness shelter. Arapahoe County is kind of in the same place we are. They did a lot of community outreach in the July-August timeframe. And have come back, and I have less information kind of on where they are in the process, but I know they had a meeting with the county commissioners, I think a couple of weeks ago. So we are keeping track of those pieces, and you know, at this point probably are at a point where we can circle back regionally and say, kind of ranking them as a region together.
Jessica, I think it's fair to say when we talk about putting money out for immediate purposes, we're really talking about programs or spending that really don't lend themselves to leveraging. Is that categorically where we're at?
Possibly. I mean, you know, things like cold weather shelter are pretty immediate, and they would be opportunities to leverage.
Okay.
You know, providing gap financing for affordable, that would be pretty immediate. Obviously, if we're going to build a piece of infrastructure anywhere in this, you know, different buckets, that's going to be a longer term piece.
Okay. Further comments? Seeing none, then I'm sorry, was there somebody else that wanted to speak?
Murillo.
Councilmember Murillo.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it'd be great to have projects that we think could be quick to kind of mobilize. I know that on the Anschutz Medical Campus, our provider, the Mile High Behavioral Health, has had some conversations, and we've been engaging in ongoing conversations about the future of their facilities there. How do we best plan for you know, the concept and best practice around like a one-stop shop centrally located to the services that folks need, and you know, that project being kind of top of mind, trying to get a better sense of if that particular project would be an example of like a shovel ready type thing, or is that something that we need to put a little more resource and time behind on that particular one.
Is there a staff response?
Councilmember Murillo, that would be a longer term one, right? We're looking at, you know, a site. Where is the site going to be? We're looking at project design. We're going to have to bring together partners. For example, that one's very expensive. We have been working with our public works staff. It's about $100 million type of facility. So that's probably private foundational support we'll need to gather for that. So that to me is in that longer term sort of strategic transformational projects that's not shovel ready, but would be primed to start the process now to be able to spend the money by the deadline in the next couple of years.
Further discussion? Seeing none, is there any objection to having staff move forward Coombs proposal of 20% of ARPA dollars to be to have staff work on recommendations for how to prioritize and spend those dollars?
Mayor?
Councilmember Coombs.
Can I revise that proposal to just be that staff bring forward a recommendation of an amount of funding that they recommend for immediate assistance?
Very well. Is there any objection to the revised Coombs proposal? Seeing none, then that's the direction to staff. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Item number.
categories. Sorry, I don't know if you want to go through the other two, infrastructure and service preservation.
Okay, please.
So the next one would be in the same exercise, infrastructure. So road maintenance, water sewer enhancements, broadband, accessibility, multimodal. And then there's one more after this.
Is there any discussion on this, on infrastructure? Councilmember McConnell.
Thank you, sir. Mike, could you elaborate a little more on what water system enhancements mean? Because I know that there are a lot of residents who are in need of assistance maintaining their private, I think I mentioned this earlier, sewer and water lines. So just want to know if something like that was included in there.
Increase in terms of the public engagement.
Yes, so in some of the open feedback, people did talk about needing sewer improvements, especially when they were in certain geographies in the city, making sure that they had clean, safe access. The other piece on water system enhancements that people mentioned was thinking long-term about, drought conditions and making sure that we had the right systems in place to protect our water source.
Great, thank you.
I have
a Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, on the accessibility, technological improvements to city facilities, does that include improvements to just overall website, IT? I get a lot of comments from constituents that it's really difficult to navigate. They can't find information. So I was just wondering if it can be used in that way as well.
I think that'd be probably pushing the definition. It was much more infrastructure in terms of large scale investments. So I think was the goal. But that's certainly, I guess something staff could look at.
So not a website, reinvent the website cannot happen.
Oh, it could definitely be a part of it. But I think that my sense was this was thinking bigger picture, bigger technology.
So what about cybersecurity? Would that be under that bucket?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. And then, one more. What about security of the building?
That would certainly be something that would fit in this category as well.
Okay, thank you.
Further discussion on infrastructure? Seeing none, then please proceed to the next slide.
And the last one, service preservation, citizen public safety, and other essential workers, assistance to nonprofits, the restoration of lost city revenue, debt service repayment, paying back money the city owes, ARPA administration requirements, so more of the administrative tasks.
Mayor.
Councilmember Coons.
So in the past, when we had the conversation about premium pay for essential workers with the CARES funds, it was determined that only public safety could receive that premium pay and that other essential workers were not eligible. Does that apply here, or are there other essential workers, for example, our water and wastewater employees who are actually testing for COVID at points during this pandemic? Our public works folks, would those folks be eligible for premium pay?
Yes.
Further discussion.
I have one on debt.
Mayor Pro Tem. Mayor Pro Tem.
So it can be used for debt service repayment, or we just put that on there?
I think we just put.
Yeah, I don't think it could it?
It can't. I did specifically mention that, so I don't know how that ended up on there.
Okay, that's what I thought. Thank you.
Okay, further discussion. Seeing none, the direction to staff is to determine an amount that could be spent in a very quick period of time on different projects, and to bring those projects and to bring an amount forward to council to review. Is there any objection to that?
No, thank you so much for the feedback.
Is there any objection? Seeing none, then that's the direction for staff. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Number 5A, revised proposal for new climate action advisory commission.
good evening, Mayor and council members. Thanks for your time this evening. This is the revised Climate Action Advisory Commission proposal this evening. The major update from the previous discussion is that the information regarding the Oil and Gas Advisory Committee has been removed from this proposal. And let me share my screen. And while I'm doing that,
I'm sorry, Jeff, is this your proposal or is this Councilmember Coombs' proposal?
Councilmember Coombs, yeah. I'm just going to share my slides and then I will.
I don't understand why you're giving the presentation.
I apologize. I was just introducing myself and getting the slides ready.
Mayor, I asked Mr. Moore to help with the slides, so he's pulling up the slides. So thank you, Jeffrey, for pulling those up. And as I'm sure you're aware, staff were also involved in this proposal initially, and I did ask for their feedback in making and their help in making the changes. So Ian Best, Karen Hancock, and Jeffrey Moore, who were previously involved in the proposal, were also involved in helping me revise the proposal to address the comments that were made in the last meeting. I am hoping that since I didn't receive any comments or concerns, that this addresses some of the concerns that folks did express. I did my best to do so. Mayor, I can't hear you.
Let me relate comments to you, and I will express those again as we move through this presentation.
Okay, I don't believe that you had seen this. In fact, I think you said you hadn't seen it. When we had
well, okay, please proceed.
Yep, and so the comments that were made at the last meeting were that the scope was overbroad. And so I did work with staff on addressing that section, making it more specific, and making sure that the charge of the commission is specifically to make recommendations, non-binding recommendations on issues related specifically to climate and sustainability. And then we also changed the name, so to Climate Action Advisory Commission, to make sure that it was very clear that it's advisory in nature and to line up the name with other commissions that have previously or that already exist within the city. Another comment that was made was on the composition. And so Jeffrey, if you can go, I think, to the next slide, is where we have the composition of the committee. So still residents, advocacy groups, but then instead of the regional representatives, which there were comments made about whether or not there should be regional representatives on the committee, we replaced those with a land use expert and a transportation expert, and then left it up to the commission as to whether they felt it was necessary to include regional and state governing bodies working on climate in the process and on the commission. So those are the changes that have been made, along with, of course, removing all references to the Oil and Gas Advisory Committee and any dissolution of that committee. And those were really kind of the comments that I had in advance. Other than Mayor, we did have our conversation. And so this does specifically talk about not only climate, but also environmental sustainability more generally. And that's also within the charge of the commission as laid out and as everyone received in the backup. That's the brief presentation that I have on the changes that were made. And I would ask my colleagues to please support bringing forth this commission, which I believe is essential to addressing really one of the major issues of our time, which is the impacts of climate and sustainability on our future, on our city.
Thank you. And I discussed with you an environmental committee. I will go forward with the drafting then of an environmental committee where climate change will be a component part of it as we look at carbon offsets at the local level, but it will encompass much more, and I will put that forward before the end of the year. Further discussion?
Mayor Dave Gruber.
Councilmember Gruber.
I think it's important, we went through it rather rapidly in the consent items, but the city of Aurora completed a Partners in Energy plan, which consisted of businesses, individuals, and Excel Energy, where they've done an extensive plan to reduce various types of energy usage within the city. Many of the things that this climate action group is supposed to do in the future has already been done by what we approved earlier tonight.
Further discussion?
Mayor, if I may.
Councilmember Coombs.
I think that probably even Excel would acknowledge that that's a first step and not a end all be all to addressing these issues. We're going to continue to see significant issues related to climate sustainability and environment in our community. And energy use is not the only one. Transportation and land use are significant. That's why they're specifically called out in the membership. The CDOT greenhouse gas rulemaking is going to have an impact on the city and on what we do moving forward. And the city's commitment in our strategic plan to a comprehensive environmental stewardship plan is also something that is going to require not only community input in developing that plan, but also in continuing to implement the necessary pieces of fulfilling that plan into the future. And so I do see this as something that's needed both immediately and long-term, above and beyond what's already been done. And then I do know as well that Karen Hancock may be having technical difficulties, but she also did participate in working on this. So I wanted to see if she has any comments as well.
Further comments?
I just wanted to, I hope that you can hear me and I'm not choppy.
You sound good.
Okay, good. I just wanted to say that the Excel Energy is particularly just for the utility to meet their obligations under the PUC. So we are absolutely helping them with that because they offer resources to our businesses. So was there anything else that Councilmember Coombs you'd like me to address on that?
No, that's really helpful. I just saw that you commented, so I wanted to give you an opportunity to comment. I know part of our conversation has also just been about how these issues are very spread out across a lot of different staff. And so having a centralized location to discuss these issues would be beneficial.
Further discussion?
Mayor.
I'm sorry. Councilmember Hills.
Thank you. I supported this the last time and I support it again. I'm not sure why we would need a competing measure unless it's just to be adversarial. Councilmember Coombs brought this forward at least a month ago and was very forthcoming about being open to working with people and their concerns. So I'm just not sure why everybody was willing to work with Councilmember Coombs and you're choosing to bring a competing something later. I hope that you can maybe find it in your heart to try to work together with the person who already brought this forward and not putting the redundant work for both staff and council. Thank you.
First discussion.
Yes, Mayor.
Mayor Pro Tem.
So we have a water committee, we have the Pfizer committee, so Pfizer deals with the regulations that come down from the federal government and the state government. I'm still trying to wrap my head around the need for this because that would be addressed at that committee. The water committee addresses any water issues that we have. And then we have the oil and gas that would address oil and gas. So what other regulations are we trying to address? That is our responsibility as a city.
Okay.
Not a utility or that, that type of thing.
Mayor, may I respond?
Yes, please proceed.
Yeah, so I guess I'll say it again. The city in our strategic plan already committed to having as a city an environmental stewardship plan. And so typically when cities put forth something like this, they have a community engagement process, typically through some type of a committee. If you look to Denver, Colorado Springs, other cities that have done this, that's part of their process, is having a committee that then does the community engagement piece. And then once you've done the community engagement on creating the plan, then there are going to be multiple steps, right? Environmental stewardship plan is not a one-time thing. It's an ongoing thing that we're going to have to continue working through the actual steps for probably 20, 30 years as a city. And so having a home for that, as far as community feedback, community input, seems very important to me. And again, as I've talked to staff about right now, conversations about sustainability are really spread out across all these departments and committees. And it would be a benefit to staff as well in doing that work to have a centralized location to have those conversations. That doesn't mean they couldn't also be had in those other committees, but the focus of the water committee is not sustainability. That's a small piece of what we talk about.
There's protection of water and conservation is definitely discussed.
But it's a part of what they talk about. It's not their whole charge. The Oil and Gas Committee's charge is not conservation. None of these are charged with conservation. And so it's about bringing all of that together in one place.
Okay, so just to follow up, when you said staff is going to be, this is part of the plan and the staff is supposed to come up with a plan, why can't they do community engagement like we do all the time for all these other things that we're doing in the city? Staff is charged with something and then we do community engagement. I look at it as like, there's probably at least going to be at least 12 members, possibly, I don't know, I didn't count them all up, but it could be a 15-member committee. It just seems like it's going to get very cumbersome. And I don't know if it's too broad personally, but maybe it needs to be more narrowed down to specific, charges.
Okay, so I guess my other comment would be that this has been available in our backup. And this is the second time that staff and I have taken the time to bring it forward to council. And so if people had major concerns with the function, the charge as it's laid out, or the membership, it would have been helpful to hear about that ahead of.
Thank you. And I was, I didn't see the backup. I didn't see your proposal until it was made available. Sorry, I was in Dallas visiting my son. Didn't see it till today.
Okay. Well, if you have specific recommendations, it would be helpful to have specific recommendations come forward in study session.
I thought this was the purpose of study session, was to discuss it, but maybe I'm mistaken and we'll just vote when we get on the floor.
Yeah, I mean, I brought it to a study session and then I brought it back to another study session based on the comments I received. I also reached out to people individually to ask for recommendations and did not receive a response from a lot of folks.
Okay, I didn't recall that you reached out to me. And if I missed any kind of personal communication, I apologize. I thought the purpose of today was to further discuss this. And you're making it sound like we're not able to discuss it and that we should have just had our questions given to you way ahead of time.
Well, the concern is that every time I bring it to study session, people don't have specific recommendations and they just want to say no. And it is frustrating.
Okay, my recommendation is that you have too many members on the committee.
Okay.
Remove the discretionary members, then that's fine.
Further discussion? And I certainly had a conversation with you about CML and I think you're aware of where I'm at. Further discussion?
Mayor.
Councilmember McConnell.
Thank you, sir. I didn't have that conversation with you, so if you could, enlighten the rest of us as to where you're at, I'd appreciate it.
That it should be an environmental committee, and that no different than what I said earlier today, that I expressed to Councilmember Coombs, that climate change and carbon offsets should be a subcomponent of it, and it should cover other areas as well. And I will bring that forward before the end of the year.
Mayor?
Further discussion?
If I may?
Yes.
The revised description that was in the backup already says climate and sustainability issues, and it lays out other areas besides climate. And so I'm not sure if you want those areas to be further specified, like that we add water conservation or other things, but like that is already in there, that it's climate and sustainability. And that's what you said at CML was sustainability. And so that's in there.
I said it'd be an environmental committee, and I think that the council will have the opportunity to look at both proposals. Further discussion?
Mayor?
Councilmember McConnell.
Yeah, respectfully, sir, you're advocating for this exact ordinance, and then
No, really.
yeah, you actually are, though.
No, I'm not. You haven't seen it yet. How do you know? I said
what you literally just said is already covered in
you will have an opportunity.
Have you read this?
You will have, yes, and you will have an opportunity to review two proposals, and you can make a difference, and you can make a decision between the two. Further discussion?
Okay.
Mayor.
Further discussion?
Mayor.
Councilmember Gardner.
Thank you. At the last study session that this item was brought forward, I had brought up some of my objections. I think one specifically was the scope. I think how it's defined. This group could potentially or would potentially review essentially any ordinance that comes forward. And I just, it's still written that way because, you know, pretty much anything in the city that comes forward you could argue that it would have a tie to sustainability. And I just, like I said last time, I think we probably have 8 or 9 too many boards and commissions as it is already. And secondly, I have an issue with creating a board that essentially is going to review every ordinance that's brought forward. And, you know, just putting cards on the table, you know, last time after this item failed, one of my colleagues posted on social media that those that voted against it were sadistic death cultists, and Councilmember Coombs liked that post. And so frankly, I didn't really feel like it was my place or like I really wanted to spend the time to get this to a place where I could support it.
Further discussion?
Yes, Mayor.
Mayor Pro Tem.
And I will echo that because I was quite offended that a council member would publicly put such a nasty comment out there that about us being sadistic death cultists. And again, you know, and then the other council member liking it. And it's, you know, how does that welcome collaboration or conversation? It doesn't. It was very insulting. It was insulting, and it was rude, and I mean, beyond, I don't even beyond comprehension, really, to have an elected official put that out there.
Sure, Mayor.
Further discussion?
Mayor.
Councilmember McConnell.
Thank you, sir. So I do believe in radical candor, and my intent is not to be a career politician. So if you take offense to me being very honest with people and expressing to them what I see on the inside, on the other side of this dais, coming from Republican elected officials, I'm sorry. I think you might need to do some soul searching, because I do believe, honest to God, that the Republican Party is a sadistic death cult. It is the most dangerous organization that has ever existed on this planet. You ignore science, you obstruct, you refuse to have conversations with people. This is something that I see at the local level all the way up to the halls of Congress. We cannot stand, we can't have a functioning society like this. So if you don't want me
you think that's
to
okay
just
to
tell
say
people,
okay,
yeah,
okay,
absolutely.
Okay.
I stand by what I said, Councilmember Bergen. I absolutely stand by what I said.
Further discussion?
Yes.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
Councilmember,
this party killed a lot of people.
Councilmember Grover.
No, it's Gardner. This is fun.
Oh, Councilmember Gardner, I'm sorry.
I'm okay, thank you.
Councilmember Grover, did you have a point?
No, I just love being lectured by socialists. It's always fun.
Further discussion? Councilmember Coombs.
So, if there's no further discussion, I'd like to call for the vote. It sounds like people have made up their minds already on this issue, and it's not going to move forward regardless of what I do, and regardless of what staff do to try to make this a workable proposal.
Is there objection to the Coons proposal?
I object.
Councilmember Gardner. Sorry, Councilmember Gruber.
Gardner.
Councilmember Gardner.
Bergen.
Gruber. Bergen.
Burzins.
Burzins.
And we were also called goons too by the chair of the Democrat Party, Arapahoe County, who's also a socialist. So.
Further discussion. I'm sorry. On to the is there further opposition? The mayor is opposed. So I have Gardner, Gruber, Bergen, Burzins, and the mayor. Is there further opposition? Seeing none, the proposal will not move forward. Seeing no other business before us, the meeting is adjourned.
Night, Phil.